Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by Aperture, a premier manufacturer of LED lighting with the industry's greatest variety of fixtures for your complete lighting needs. Aperture recently announced the new Storm family of lights. With LED white light quality that matches natural daylight and classic tungsten bulbs, plus extreme low-end dimming while maintaining color quality. Discover more about the new Storm lights and the complete Aperture lighting ecosystem at aperture.com. Today we're speaking with a director. His credits include Moonlight, If Beale Street Could Talk, and The Underground Railroad. We're pleased to welcome Barry Jenkins. Barry, thank you for doing this.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. A long-time listener. It's nice to be
Oh, wow.
to be amongst the greats.
Oh, it's great to have you here.
I think we'll start with our first question, which is always, how did you get to where you are today? When you were growing up, was filmmaking what you wanted to do, or is it something that you
Was
found
it even a
later?
possibility in your world?
It was not a possibility in my world,
Yeah.
and not something I wanted to do. I grew up in basically the same neighborhood, the same world as the character in Moonlight, just to give perspective. And back then, the idea of making movies was just not even. It wasn't reasonable. It was implausible. But I do remember as a kid really liking movies, and I believe it was. This is back in the days of regular television where you twist the antenna, and on the weekends certain movies would show, either kung fu movies or these movies in syndication. And I remember watching Die Hard at the end, and I should not have been watching it. I was probably too young, the John McTiernan film, and just at the
Yeah.
end actually paying attention to the credits, because normally they just sped through the credits because they had such
Yeah.
tight margins to get all these commercials in, and so the credits would just speed by in 30 seconds. But for whatever reason, this time the credits played at normal speed. And I was like, wow, a lot of people make a movie. And it just kind of stuck in my head somewhat, but I still didn't have any illusion of becoming a filmmaker until I went to university, a very big public state school. It was the only place I could afford to attend college. And they had a film school at Florida State University. And after
And
having,
what were you studying? What were you majoring in, or whatever the word is?
so I went there. I guess I graduated in 1998, just to date myself. And I was studying English education initially. I wanted to be a high school English teacher, but the school, again, it's a big public state school. It wasn't like a Harvard or Yale or anything like that. And so the education department had some sort of like situation where if you graduated with a degree in education from this college, you wouldn't get certified. And it had to go through basically a 3 semester cycle before those degrees would be valid, because something had fallen ill in the program. So I switched from that to creative writing. And so I was a creative writing major when I was just walking across campus one day and saw a sign that said film school. And I thought, oh, I've always liked movies. Maybe I'll try to get into film school and see what that's like.
Wow. I wouldn't have connected you with Die Hard necessarily. Were there other films and filmmakers that sort of inspired you?
Well, after I got into film school, and this was still right in that moment, and it's interesting, you were one of the people with Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, that kind of like
Ah,
opened this sort of like chasm where, we were still doing everything on film when I first attended film school. For about the first year and a half, I was in film school for about 3 years. It was all 16 millimeter. Like the first day of class, you get a Bolex camera, 100-foot daylight spool of film, a reversal film stock. They didn't give us a light meter, but they told us roughly what the f-stops would correspond to if it was bright, if it was overcast, if it was very gray, and then relied on us to retain that information, go out, shoot that 100-foot spool, They processed it, and the next week we came in and they projected everyone's work in a theater. It was a great way to learn, hands-on
Yeah.
filmmaking, the basics. But I grew up like the kid in Moonlight, so I didn't know you needed light to expose film. I just didn't know that. And a friend of mine, who's also, a working director now, a guy named Wes Ball, who just did Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, he was in that class with me, and he knew
Oh,
everything.
wow.
He knew everything about
Ah.
filmmaking. And so I realized after that first semester that I was just in over my head. So I went to the head of the program and I said to the dean, I think I really want to become a filmmaker. I want to try my hand at this, but I don't know the things that these other kids know. I don't have the skills. And if I don't have the skills, there's no way for me to know if I have the talent, or the wherewithal. So I asked if I could take a year off from film school and give myself my own teaching, my own self-guided learning intensive. And they granted me that year. And that's when I started
Wow.
watching films with the intention of, well, what kind of filmmaker do I want to be? I mean, I started reading books like Masters of Light. I got a subscription to Sight and Sound, and I just watched. I realized very quickly that everyone was making films. They were emulating the films they were watching, and so everyone was making Wes Anderson
Ah.
knockoffs. Everyone was trying
Yeah.
to ape Steven Spielberg, even though we were shooting movies in our dorm rooms. And so I thought, oh, I guess the best way to make my voice distinct is to watch the things that they aren't. And so I went to a Blockbuster Video, which was this is a small town in the American South, so it wasn't a big foreign film section, but it was enough that I felt like I could scale that mountain, and I just watched everything. I just indiscriminately was grabbing discs off the shelf to sort of teach myself, okay, what does a movie look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? And that's when, I think the influences that are still present in my work, Claire Denis, Lynn Ramsey, Wong Kar-wai, that's when I started to see Ho Xiaoshen, those kinds of films.
It also allows you to think about what affects me,
Hmm.
what is affecting, because you can watch a lot of movies and not be affected, but then you see a movie and you go, wow. So what was it that really got to me?
I think what got to me, I'll just speak of, Wong Kar-wai and Claire Denis in particular. I remember
Mhm.
with Wong Kar-wai watching Chungking Express was the film of his that really grabbed me. And just this idea that film was these units of time that were arranged in such a
Mm.
way that they could recreate or just purely create a feeling that you couldn't arrive at through any other means. There was something about the nonlinear styling, just speaking of craft, that he and Christopher Doyle were employing, but then the feeling it gave me. I was used to watching movies and getting an intellectual thrill, like, oh wow, that's really awesome, that's really cool. But watching Chungking Express and then watching this Claire Denis film, Friday Night, especially the second half of Friday Night, I just realized I was getting caught up in this almost synesthetic sort of like wave of emotion. And I thought, this is impossible. Like movies don't do this, not the movies I have been watching to that point. And if there was something that I felt like I could do in filmmaking, because again, I wasn't sure I could have the technical savvy of someone like Wes. And Wes is a good friend. Wes makes really emotional films on a much, much larger scale, craft wise than the movies I make. And so I wasn't sure if I could master that, but I did feel like because of the way I grew up, there was so much energy, so much emotion inside of me. And something in the makeup of those films gave me the confidence that, oh, I could take this kind of styling, this kind of craft, and I can capture this energy, this emotion that I have inside myself and translate it to images in a way that other people could feel them as well.
So you took the year off. Then
Mhm.
did you go back to
I did.
film
I
school?
did. I took the year off and I came back into the program, and I was actually, I still work with a lot of the same collaborators I befriended in my time at university. And someone pointed out to me, "Oh, if you hadn't taken that year off, you guys wouldn't be in the same class." And I was like, "Oh,
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
that's a very good point. We wouldn't be in the same class." But I came back into the program, and we didn't make any narratives in that first semester. It was really just I think it was the program assessing, okay, where where is everyone's skill level upon entry, and then assessing, and what kind of facility do they have with storytelling, with skill, all these different things. But then when I came back into the program, that was the year where you start making short films, and it was the same thing. It was a very what's the word I want to use, democratic process, I guess, or everyone got the exact same amount of film stock. Now you could choose which stock you wanted to use, but everyone got the same amount, the same footage length, and everyone used the same camera. Other than that, you could do whatever you wanted, and the films were capped at a 7-minute picture runtime and 1-minute credits, so they were 8-minute short films. And I re-entered the program, and I decided I wanted to make a film that proved that I could actually do this. And so this was right after 9/11, and there was a laundromat in this, again, small southern town in the American South, where the owners of the laundromat had a sign that said American flags cleaned free. And they were Arab American. And I think it was their way of showing that they were good immigrants, that they were patriotic. And I just thought that's a really interesting thing. And what I just at this time, I was like a sponge. I had a roommate who was obsessed with Napoleon, and he would always just go around our house quoting all these things about Napoleon. So the short film is called My Josephine, and it's about the man who runs this laundromat and his coworker who he's in love with, and he refers to her as his Josephine. And it's just one night in their lives washing these American flags for free, and it's wild. It's the same DP as everyone who worked on Moonlight worked on the film in some capacity,
Wow.
and it's very soft focus. We shot it on, I believe, 250 daylight stock, even though the whole thing is shot inside a laundromat at night. And we're all kids, and so the mag spooled as one of my friends was downloading it, and so there's all these light flashes that appear in the movie, but we just leaned into it, and we just made the light flashes a
Mhm.
part of these elliptical sort of like thought breaks in his reminiscence, the main character of his Josephine, and it's in French and Arabic and English. A wild short film, not the thing that anyone would have expected me to make coming into the program, but it was exactly the thing I think I needed to make because I took my experience of being a young Black man in the American South, and I wanted to find a way to use this empathy machine of film to empathize with these people, these Americans who now felt ostracized within their own communities, and it worked. Somehow the short worked, and I think that's the only reason why I'm talking to you guys right now. I think if that hadn't worked, I maybe would have given up and decided that yeah, maybe I don't have the facility to do what all my peers are doing.
But I read after film school, you hightailed it to LA,
I did,
and
I did.
it didn't work out. Why did you sort of? Does everybody head to LA? Here we are in LA. I mean, does everybody head to LA for the dream of filmmaking?
It was what we did in the time. We
Yeah.
our program was again a very hands-on program. That energy of the first day where you get this Bolex camera, and 100-foot daylight spool of film, that was the energy for the entire time. We were always told you are blue collar artists, and we're going to send you to Hollywood with actual physical skills. And if you need work, you can work on a film set. And so 90% of us
Oh.
did. We all moved out together. They were always small classes, a group of 30. And so maybe 20 of us would move out all at once. But the great thing of that is you have the support system. And so I
Oh
didn't I
wow.
don't I didn't know
All
anything
right.
about making movies. I knew nothing. Like I didn't know the business of it. I didn't know just nothing. All I knew was this program where every semester you were guaranteed to get a camera and some film stock and you could go and make whatever
Yeah.
the hell you wanted. And so I thought, oh, I'll go to Hollywood and it'll be the same thing. Nope.
Nope.
No, it was not. But my first job out here, I was really lucky. I interviewed for a job on a movie called Their Eyes Were Watching God, which was a movie for television starring Halle Berry that was produced by Oprah Winfrey, Miss Winfrey, excuse me. It was an adaptation of a Zora Neale Hurston novel. And Darnell Martin, who did I Like It Like That and the pilot for Oz, she was the director, And she hired me because in the interview, I had my short films with me. And rather than interviewing me, she just decided to watch the short films.
Oh, wow.
And based on the quality, I'm using air quotes here, she saw in those shorts, she hired me, and it was great. I was with her from pre-production all the way through post-production, and so I got to see the entire process of how, a reasonably budgeted, back then, film. It was a film for television, but it was starring an Academy Award-winning actress, and produced by Miss Oprah Winfrey, and this great director was directing it. So I got to see the whole process from soup to nuts, and I was like, "This is wild."
It didn't put you off then.
You know what? The process didn't put me off because as a director, you never really get to watch another director work. In film school,
Right.
we're all kids. It's not
Right.
like NYU and USC where, those kids are bringing Roger Deakins out to shoot their short films.
Yeah.
This was just a bunch of us kids. And so getting to watch Darnell work was the first time like, oh, this is how a real director directs movies. And her directing, I think, is still a part of the way I carry myself on set. She was just very present, very physically present in her body, like moving through the shots. It was just like her process is very alive. And I thought, oh, and actually was the opposite. I was like, this is incredible. I have to do this right now. Now I'm 23 years old. Who in the hell is going to give me money to make a movie, in the Hollywood ecosystem at that time? Instead, I got a job working at Harpo Films in the year after the completion of my work with Darnell. And that was when I, young person that I was, thought that I should be writing movies and making movies, and that Hollywood was keeping me down, and that it was never going to happen. So I cashed in my 401k from Harpo Films, and I left Hollywood. I left filmmaking behind. I took trains around the U.S. for a year.
Really? Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Wow.
couldn't afford to go backpacking through Europe, so I thought, oh, I'll
Yeah.
backpack on Amtrak through the States.
Wow. What did you discover?
That I was very lonely, and that there was so
Yeah.
much of the country I hadn't seen, and that even if the reasons weren't right for no one in Hollywood helping me manifest my
Ah.
storytelling dreams, the end result was correct. I wasn't ready. I didn't know enough about myself or about the world to do the things that all the people I admired had already done. I went to the
Yeah.
Telluride Film Festival in 2002, the student symposium they have there, and it was the year City of God was there. Lynn Ramsey was there, Morvan Caller, David Cronenberg was there with a film called Spider. Just really wonderful directors who I got to meet and speak to, especially Lynn. Lynn was so young, or at least her energy felt so young and so fresh. She made it seem like the thing that I'm doing is not very different from the thing that you're doing or you want to do. And yet I had to have this actual experience in the world to realize that no, I'm not ready to do that. And I think if there's one thing that crystallized while being out on the road by myself in this extreme loneliness, it was that, yeah, you're not ready to do that. You have to make some other choices first, and commit to some aspect of life.
Yeah. Somebody said, you can't really make films about life unless you experience it. So I think that's a really good
Yeah.
point, what you're saying. But it was quite a long time before you made the first film that brought you
Medicine for
notice,
melancholy.
Medicine for Melancholy.
Mhm.
Because to talk about that journey, it's kind of really interesting because the film is so different.
Yeah,
I can't relate it to another film I've seen, except
Yeah.
for maybe John Cassavetes. I don't know, but that's extreme.
that is extreme. Yeah. After I did this trip on the train, I would go to a certain place and then I'd stay for, sometimes 2 days, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 2 months. And San Francisco was the longest of those trips. One of my best friends, James Laxton, who's the cinematographer on most of my work, his mother is a costume designer, Aggie Rogers. And Aggie is the person who got me that interview for Their Eyes Are Watching God. I don't know if you've worked with Aggie, but she has a really storied
Mm-mm.
filmography. Anyone I meet in film. I can name 5 movies she's done, and you've definitely seen them. From the things like The Conversation, American Graffiti, The Hurricane,
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Beetlejuice, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, just like a lot of
Yeah.
really great films. She was nominated for The Color Purple, but I went and stayed in her attic for 2 months when I first began this train trip. And I met a young woman in San Francisco, but I had to continue my walkabout. So I continued on my train trip. And when I came back to San Francisco a year later, not that she was waiting for me, but she was still there, and we began a relationship. And it was really beautiful. It was the first real serious relationship I had ever been in. There were a few things that were very heightened about it because of where we each were in our lives at that time. And when the relationship didn't work and I was left in the city, I had to really account for why I was existing. I realized I was existing in that city purely for the sake of that relationship. And I never forget someone said, "Hey, Barry, so what do you do?" I go, "Oh, well, I'm a filmmaker." And they would say, "Oh, well, what have you done?" And I had to realize that I hadn't done anything since leaving film school. I think it had maybe been 5, 6 years at that point. And that's when I set about writing a film that I could make with more or less almost no resources that spoke to what I was feeling, as a young person, particularly as a young Black person living in San Francisco at that time in the aftermath of this relationship. And that's how Medicine for Melancholy came to be. And it's interesting. There's this website Letterbox. I don't know if you guys go on it or know of it, but someone sent me a review of this film, Medicine for Melancholy, on Letterbox, and it was clearly a very young person who had seen Moonlight first and then went back and watched this
Yeah.
film, and they were like,
Ah.
"How the hell did the person who made this film make Moonlight?" I was like, "Well, it's the difference between having $15,000 to make a film,
Yeah.
and 1.5 million to make a film."
Yeah.
Um, but we didn't care about what the movie was going to look like or what anyone was going to think of, the modest means we had to make it. We just had to make it. And so the reason why it cost $15,000 is because a friend of mine who was actually working with West Ball at the time happened to have $15,000 laying around and wrote the number on a napkin
Wow.
and said, "Could you make a movie for this much?" And I said, "Yeah,
Wow.
I think I can." And that was how it happened.
Wow.
Wow.
And how did you approach it? Because it seems kind of ad lib and spontaneous,
Mhm.
but maybe it wasn't.
It was not, it's script. I actually have the script. The script is on. I was in this office getting ready for this,
Uh-huh.
and I realized the script is here in this office. But it's I didn't realize how short it was. The producer at the time, just because everything was so modest, we didn't have sides, but he printed this little booklet. You
All
can't see
right.
Oh,
All
wow.
right.
and in it, there's all the script and all these blank pages. I don't know if it's showing up at the light level, but it's
Yeah.
only a
Yeah.
72-page script. And so if you're gonna make a
Wow.
movie in 15 days, yeah, having a 72-page
All right.
script is the way to do it.
But then but did you stick to the script? Is all the dialogue or the scenes, is it what you had on the page?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think
Yeah,
in
wow.
order to make a movie in that is a 15-day shoot, 5-person crew, we had to know what we were gonna do. And I wrote the film to take place in locations that I knew we had access to. There were certain elements of it in the movie. The main character installs fish tanks for a living, installs aquariums, I should say. The reason for that is
Yeah.
one of the apartments we had access to, the boyfriend of the woman whose apartment it was, he was an aquarium installer. And I was like, well, I can't take these tanks out of the apartment. This is now what the character does. And that then became,
Yeah.
part of the theme of the film. It was just and in a way, it was kind of the lesson of film school. There were people trying to make short films where the UN was taking place in their dorm room or in the sort of like student union
Yeah.
Yeah.
cafeteria.
Yeah.
That's never going to
Yeah.
work. Make it a really interesting dorm room, because that's what you have access to.
Yeah.
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 And the look to that movie, I love the sort of, it's almost black and white, but certain colors come through. Was this something that you thought out, and how did you do that?
Yeah,
Choose what would show up?
it was. I was I was feeling just very melancholic at this
Yeah.
time of my life in San Francisco, and even though it's such a gorgeous city, I mean, there are so many times where I wish that the hub of our industry was up there because it's just such a
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
it's just with my energy, the hills, the grayness, the fog, the microclimates. I just love
Oh,
it.
Mm.
But emotionally, I was feeling in a way that the color had been drained from this city over time. It felt like, and I wanted to reflect that. I think that's the only film James and I did the color correction ourselves because we had to. We couldn't afford
Uh-huh.
to do color
Yeah.
correction anywhere. In film school, we were really obsessed with the original pressing of Masters of Light. And in Masters of Light, so many of the cinematographers they talk about going in to do the optical and really working the chemical baths. And we thought, oh, we'll have a
Mhm.
digital version of that process. And so we actually shot the film super hyper saturated, and then we worked in Final Cut Pro. Used to have an attachment called, I think it was called Apple Color. And we used Apple Color to sort of go through and just slowly desaturate the film to the point that I felt like we were reflecting what the main character was feeling. So it was intentional, but then we did it. It's weird. You wouldn't think you could do something digitally by feel, by trial and error. And it seems so very binary with the ones and zeros. But yeah, we just did it by feel.
and how about the shot construction? I mean, did you work out? Did you work out the shots and the look of the film as you walked around locations, maybe with James, or
Yeah.
how did that come about?
James and I have always had like a really fluid relationship to composition, to shot design. I think back then we didn't realize we were doing it, but on the Underground Railroad, we really had to crystallize what the hell the process is that we're
Mm, mm,
using as a framework. But we would usually get to set, and because the cast was so small, and we only had control of the cast, oftentimes if we were out in the world, we're controlling nothing but the two principals. And we would often just figure out, well, I call it a lightning strike. If lightning struck the set and we had to go home, would we have enough to comprise a scene?
mm.
And so we're always
Mm.
looking for this lightning strike take, this lightning strike setup. And once we capture that, then we allow ourselves to start thinking, well, what else can we do here? What else dovetails with the energy that we've arrived at with the cast, with the crew and constructing the scene. And we sort of work out from there. With this film, that was it primarily. We often shot list, but we don't storyboard. And so
Mm.
in
Mhm.
the case of this film, I think we shot listed a little bit, but sometimes we just had no access to the locations before the day of filming
Right,
because we were
right,
stealing everything. And so we couldn't go somewhere and work out the shots because someone might say, "Hey, what are you doing here?" We wanted them to tell us,
Yeah.
"Hey, what are you doing here?" as we're finishing the day, because
Yeah.
now
right,
we
right,
switched out
right,
the memory cards and now we're home. Um,
right,
and so it
right.
was it was really fluid. The smaller the location, the more time we had to work out the shots. But we were just building it setup by setup and really just being open to what would blossom out of the two actors.
Did you shoot in chronological order, or?
We tried to. We tried to. We
Yeah.
we did we did as much as possible. In the end, yeah, we kind of did. The last shot of the film is the last shot we filmed. I do know that,
Yeah.
which was really lovely.
Right,
Because then we went downstairs and had beers, which was nice.
right. You remember that.
Yes, I do.
So I'm very interested then, just while we're talking about shot construction and stuff, because in Moonlight,
Hmm.
it seems some scenes like there's an opening shot and there's a shot in the restaurant cafe at the end of the film
Hmm.
that are very long, complicated shots that trade off one character another. They're really quite beautifully choreographed between the camera and the actors. But then other times you play scenes on very simple, direct cutting.
Hmm.
So was Moonlight much more pre-thought?
No, no.
No,
And
no.
both those setups you're talking about, I know for a fact they just happened
Yeah,
because the
yeah.
opening of the movie, there's a scene that we shot the same day before that scene that was meant to open the movie. We actually shot it the day before, now I'm remembering correctly, because that shot was day 5 of the first week, the opening of the film. And I remember at the end of day 4 being like, that's not the way the movie's going to open.
Ah,
And James and I got to set that morning, and we decided we should do this as a Warner. We should figure this out. And so we did. We just got it up on its feet. Had never met any of the actors before. There's no rehearsal on that film.
wow.
Had never met the Steadicam op before because
Wow.
the budget's so
Wow.
low. On Moonlight, we had 3 different Steadicam ops because we could only afford any of them for a day.
Right.
And that
Right.
guy came out on that Sunday. We shot Wednesday to Sundays, which I really loved on that film. And we
Hmm.
just decided, let's try it. And we just built it up sort of like a stage play. And the good thing is, there's no windows, there's no reflection, so we really can look everywhere. And I just
Mm,
thought
mm,
it would be lovely to drop the audience in, because I felt like the world that I grew up in hasn't been photographed as often as
mm,
maybe
Mm.
some of these other places that other filmmakers have grown up. And I wanted the audience to, from the very first frame, to really experience how dizzying, how disorienting this world can be. But once you get a hold of it, it can feel balletic. It can feel very fluid. And that was how
mm,
we
mm,
came up with that. The diner
mm,
scene, I know exactly the shot you're talking about. We had
mm,
2 nights to film the entirety of that diner sequence, everything from outside the parking lot to inside. We had 2 nights to do it. And I remember just getting there and realizing we have to get ahead. In order for me to allow the actors to have the time to really have the space, because again, there's no rehearsals. I've got to sort of get ahead somewhere. And so I mentioned earlier that one of the filmmakers I really admired in film school was this Taiwanese filmmaker, Ho Xiaoshen. Let me double check that. You said I could revisit certain things, and if Ho Xiaoshen is not Taiwanese, I'm going to get in trouble. So let me let me
I
let
can't
me.
help you there, I'm afraid.
Yeah, he is Taiwanese. I said it correctly. All
Okay.
right. It's Ho Xiaoshen, and I remember watching one of the influences for the structure of Moonlight is 3 times, and I love in 3 times the pool hall sequence. The camera's just dollying left to right, left to right. It's a very patient, as this game. I believe the game is snooker that they're playing. This game of billiards,
Okay, yeah.
and I just thought, well, where can I see the most in this location? And it was just to place the camera at the far end, and then we blocked it. Well, Trabante, the actor, can sit at the far end, and now let's just get it up and just see what we see. A really important thing happens at that moment in Moonlight. The first chapter of that film is maybe 3 or 4 weeks in time. The second chapter of the film is maybe 2 weeks, a week in time. The third chapter is maybe a day, a night, and a morning in time. And so the way the audience is being relayed time is changing, is shifting, it's stretching. And so the 2 longest shots in the movie are when he pulls up out front of the diner. He walks up, a doorbell rings, time, and then when he enters, the shot you're describing, it's just one shot. It's the longest shot of the film, and it sort of settles the audience down that we are now going to come to a rest almost in this cafe and watch this just really intense sort of reunion play out. And so that was, I knew intellectually or emotionally that had to happen. I didn't know how. And we just set the track up, and the key grip, who was actually the dolly grip, very small budget, very small crew,
Mhm.
he just, something happened between, I love on a film set where everyone, and this is something that I think I learned from watching Darnell work on Hours of Watching God, where everyone just arrives at this moment where they're working in concert because the camera's moving left to right on this one axis. Andre comes from the back. He's moving on a separate axis. Trabante comes near. As he sits, the camera, because we're on these hawk anamorphics, the focus is wild. We bring it
Mhm.
very near. And then as we come off him, we slowly ease it out. You catch Andre in the background, and then you don't realize Andre's coming right. It's just like these 3 converging sort of like galaxies, the 2 actors and the camera, the lens. And it's beautiful to know that there's this little stocky guy who you wouldn't associate with this work of art that's going to be in sight and sound. He's just pushing this machine,
Yeah.
but he's trying to push it
Yeah.
in a way that services this very delicate feeling. I just love when that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did it take a long time to rehearse though?
No, I mean we shot on that movie. We shot the rehearsals, so it wouldn't be
Right.
it
Right.
wouldn't be a
Right.
surprise to me if that take there's no way that's a comedy. There's no way that's the rehearsal take. But we always
Well, I
shot.
wouldn't have thought, but you never
Yeah,
know.
we always shot the rehearsals, and we tried to really capture magic, if we could. And I think that shot punctuates with them looking directly into the camera, which we hadn't planned for that scene as well. But it just felt like once we had gotten this long view, or however you pronounce that, it just felt like this was
Mm.
the right moment to do it.
Mm.
And you didn't have a lot of rehearsal with the
No
actors?
rehearsal.
Because
No
you
rehearsal.
got incredible performances from them.
You
I
know,
mean, the performances were wonderful.
thank you. Casting is performance, and I think our casting director, Yesi
Mm.
Ramirez, did a really great job. You know, everyone involved just believe they believe in the film. They just believe in the film,
Mm.
and it was not comfortable. No element of making this film was comfortable, but everyone really believed in it. They were motivated to bring their best selves, and what we just try to do is, for a shot like that, for instance, I'm not yelling at the actors. No, 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 cut. You have to be at that point at that moment. That's not important. If the shot breaks down for a certain moment of time, it breaks down. So long as the breakdown, we can recover from it, and the actors stay in their bodies. That's always the most important thing to me. And so I think the making of the scenes was sort of like the workshopping process. And I think the beautiful thing about that is sometimes you rehearse, everyone goes home, and now in your head, you're trying to perfect the rehearsal so that when you come back the next day, you can deliver that. Instead, we workshop these things, and then right away, it's real.
Mm.
You
Mm.
workshop it, and now it's real.
Mm. Must also have a great focus puller, frankly.
You know what? On that movie, he was game, but man, I mean, we're shooting wide open. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't have the best lighting package in the world. Again, it's a budget of 1.5 million. I mean, when he got it, he got it. And when he didn't, no one could blame him. And I think because of
Yeah.
that, in the
Yeah.
moments where he had to get it, he got it. I mean, the opening shot of the film, there's a really bad buzz. At the conclusion of that shot, I mean, it is bad. Right as all the spinning and twirling ends, Mahershala settles opposite the drug dealer, a friend of mine now,
Yeah.
Sharif Earp, and it buzzes so bad. And we tried to do whatever we could visual effects wise. It didn't matter. And I was like, you know what? I don't give a shit. That's the take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So I got to ask you, it was 8 years from your first
Mhm.
medicine for melancholy and Moonlight. Why was that? Were you traveling the world? Were you trying to get yourself ready, or?
No, I was not. Both those things, one is very glamorous and one is very admirable. And no, I was doing neither. I had a really wonderful opportunity that I squandered. I just squandered it. This was back when James Seamus and John Lyons were running Focus Features, and they had this thing where they would take, promising young filmmakers and basically just give them a deal to make their first feature. It's how Dee Reese made her wonderful first feature, Pariah. That's
Mm.
how Carrie Fukunaga made Sin Nombre. And theoretically, I was going to make a follow up to Medicine for Melancholy with the same deal. And I just couldn't crack. I just couldn't crack a script. I was writing things that I thought I needed to write to satisfy whatever
Mm.
whatever the marketplace wanted. And so I was developing this film that actually, in a vacuum, sounds kind of interesting. It was about Stevie Wonder and time travel. The story was this young artist who's obsessed with Stevie Wonder's has acquired a brownstone in Harlem that Stevie once recorded out of. And one day, this older gentleman mysteriously shows up with this Moog synthesizer that Stevie, with this band called Tonto's Exploding Headband, kind of revolutionized to make this one wonderful run of work that he made in the 1970s that won Grammy after Grammy after Grammy. The guy plays it for the first time, and it opens this portal in time, causes a citywide blackout. But when he comes
Oh, wow.
upstairs from the basement, Stevie Wonder is there, and Stevie thinks that this person who's arrived is this drummer who they requested from Detroit to come out and help them record, this first album, Music of My Mind. Now, the guy knows all the music because he's from the future. And so it becomes this butterfly effect. If you don't let Stevie figure out who he is, will you alter the course of human history? And of
Yeah,
course,
yeah, that's a good one.
and his girlfriend goes back with him because she's like a performance artist, and the women's right movement is happening. The equal rights amendment is happening at the same time, and she falls in love with the period. Anyway, it was, but does it sound like Moonlight? No, it does
Oh, it
not.
sounds like you're trying to take everything that's in your head and put it in one script.
Exactly. And it didn't work. And to James and John's credit, they were very patient with me, very, very patient for me. There was another executive named Samantha Taylor Pickett, who also was helping me, and it just didn't work. James Roger, it did not work. And so no, I was not traveling the world, and I was not waiting until I was ready. I was basically just wasting a really wonderful opportunity.
Wow.
Because I think in a vacuum, had I written the script for Moonlight and presented it to those gentlemen, I do think they would have made it. Based on them
Wow.
making Pariah and making Sin Nombre, I do think they would have made it.
Right.
But I wasn't ready to get to that point. And I've got to be
Right.
honest, it was, if you thought the train was lonely, man, it was lonely. Going
Mm.
from, because Medicine for Melancholy was reviewed in the New York Times very graciously by A.O. Scott. He made it a critic's pick and put it on his year-end list, which was absolutely wow, mental for a film that small. And I think it was a way of him saying this filmmaker has promise, and I felt like I didn't live up to any of that promise. And so 2012, 2013 were very, very lonely years.
Wow. So how did Moonlight come about? How did you get finance for it?
It came about because Adele Romanski, who is the producer of Moonlight, one of the producers of Moonlight, Bill Street Could Talk, The Underground Road, everything I've done since, was a film school classmate of mine. And she had been
Oh,
producing independent features. She was also married to my cinematographer, James Laxton. And so she called me up and said, "Hey, what the f are you doing?" I don't know your audience. I'm gonna say f. What the f are you doing? Um, you need to make a film. And she said that she had been making films with other people, some friends of ours from the same time period from our films. David Robert Mitchell, she made his first two features, and Amy Steinmetz is a good friend of ours as well, who's a filmmaker. And she was like, I only want to work on things with people I love, on things they care passionately about. So we have to find something you care passionately about and go make it. And that was how the whole process began. It's funny you mentioned world travel because Adela figured out how to scratch together about $8,000 alongside a really wonderful organization called Centerreach, and a woman named Natalie Difford who works there. And they said, "What do you need to do to be able to write?" I said, "Well, I need to go to Europe. I need to go someplace where I don't know anyone, I don't know the language, where I can just hole up for a summer, and I promise I can write a script." And so they sent me to Brussels, Belgium, and I
Wow.
wrote the script for Moonlight in Brussels, and then I went to Berlin and wrote the script for If Bill Street Could Talk. I think over about 21 days, I wrote the scripts for those two films, which was
wow.
Wow.
absolutely wild.
Wow. That seems kind of strange that you go to Europe to write something that's so personal to you about,
America.
about growing up in America. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just I was hungry, and I was back in a place I thought I wouldn't ever have to be again, which is someone said, "Hey, what do you do?" "I'm a filmmaker." "Well, what have you done?" "Oh, I made this $15,000
Mm.
film, at that point
Yeah.
6 years ago." And so it's like, well, what the hell am I doing? So I was just hungry.
Yeah.
And as you say, the story was within me. And so it wasn't intellectual, it wasn't personal, it was like almost spiritual, which is a crazy thing to say because I've never written anything that fast ever in my life. But yet the quality, if I'm speaking objectively, it didn't feel just like a junky first draft. It was the movie. The second part of that was I had been working at Telluride every year since first attending in 2002 as a student. And I finished the first draft of Moonlight and Bill Street in the summer of 2013, and then attended the Telluride Film Festival. And there was a film there called 12 Years a Slave that was world premiering. I know you guys had Dee Dee Gardner on the podcast.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
Dee Dee and Jeremy came off stage and were like, "Hey, I introduced 12 Years a Slave at that festival and ran the Q&A for the world premiere, which was way out of my depth. Like I watched the movie in the audience and then went up on stage and
Oh
sort
my
of
gosh.
orchestrated this Q&A. But Jeremy and Dee Dee said, "Hey, what have you been up to?" Because they had seen Medicine for Melancholy. And I was like, "Oh,
Mhm.
Yeah.
I actually just came back from Europe writing these two scripts." And they were like, "Oh, well, when they're ready, you should send it to us." And then 2 years later, we were premiering Moonlight at the Telluride Film Festival.
Wow.
It was
Wow.
crazy.
It's wonderful how things connect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's also wonderful that their company does do such interesting
Yeah.
things.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. It was,
and we need more companies.
Adela had, we had. It's interesting thinking now because the film has had this life, very charmed life. I mean, we all know films that are really wonderful that just slip through the cracks. And this
Right.
film Moonlight could have easily been one of those films, but it didn't. But because of that, it's easy to assume that was always the case. And we had three other different companies we were partnering up with to try to make that movie for budgets as low as $750,000. So we couldn't get
Mhm.
anyone
Yeah.
to actually turn the lever and say, okay, this is greenlit. And it wasn't until Jeremy and Dee Dee in partnership with A24. And
Mhm.
A24 hadn't financed the film at that point, but they decided that this one, working in tandem with Plan B and our company Pastel, this would be the one. That was what finally, after about a year and a half trying just to get 750
Mm.
grand, $1 million, that was what finally unlocked the key.
Oh, wow. Wow. And then it went on and won the Oscar.
It
Yeah.
did.
Was that a shock? Was that a shock? I
Of
mean, how
course,
did
it
you
was a
feel about
shock. Of
that?
course, it was a shock.
Yeah, not,
And
I don't know. There must be good and bad about it, right? I mean,
there is good and bad about it. The good is, it's the movie's just it's always going to exist in some shape or form,
yeah, yeah,
which is very humbling because again, I love making movies, and so when I think about these movies, the fond memories are often on set. Honestly, there's some
Mhm.
discovery, something that happened that we all shared that I just will never ever forget, especially on that film. Some things the kids did that just I could tell they didn't understand they were capable of those things. To see someone manifest that in themselves is like
Mm.
there's nothing like it. I'm having my first kid
mm.
in maybe 10 days. And so maybe
Oh,
Oh,
thank
congratulations.
you. Maybe I'll get to see that more often. But on film sets, I've been really blessed to have seen that, especially when you're working with non-actors and they're doing this thing for the first time. But my memories often go back to those experiences. But with the award stuff, and in particular with that Best Picture, yeah, it's bittersweet because I don't have a memory of just of pure unbridled joy or pride. It's more the first emotion is confusion. Is
Yeah.
confusion,
yeah,
and then like extreme tension. It's just
Yeah.
it just didn't feel good. But then you also realize it's not about me. That movie winning Best Picture has meant so much. A friend of mine just came back from shooting a feature as a cinematographer in New Mexico, and the gaffer was someone who'd only gotten, and it's a very small budget, although this person also works on, movies, the kind of movies
Mhm.
that you work on, Roger. Um, and was saying that the gaffer was just some kid who only got into film like maybe 6, 7 years ago. And the cinematographer was like, "Hey, so why do you do this?" And the guy goes, "There was this movie, Moonlight, that came out, and I went and saw
Oh.
that
wow,
movie, and I just thought, I want to do that." And so this guy, I think he was like a contractor, like a carpenter, and it switched to lighting. And because he's like, this is what I want to do. Got out
Ah,
of
Wow.
working in construction on houses and wanted to get into the film industry, which nobody's doing right
yeah,
now, by the way.
yeah,
Yeah, right.
As
yeah,
It's
right.
all your fault.
So-
Yeah, it's wonderful when you hear when people tell you those stories, isn't it?
Yeah.
That kind of inspiration.
yeah, because we
Yeah,
got the same
yeah,
inspiration from watching other people's
yeah,
work. The fact that my work can do
yeah,
that for someone is like wild.
yeah.
So then you went on and did Beale Street
Hmm.
next.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I'd written that in tandem with Moonlight, and so it was always going to be the next thing, which was really comforting because I had this thing happen with Moonlight, and I didn't have this very solid foundation of knowing what I was going to do and who I was going to do with it. I may have been lost. I really may have just been completely lost.
Right.
I'm really interested in. Then you went on to do the Underground Railway
Hmm.
TV series, and that's adapted from. It's adapted from a book, is it?
Yeah, it is. It is the Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
and
What drew you to that?
I've always been obsessed with just the term Underground Railroad. As a kid,
Yeah,
when you first hear it, you imagine, black people on trains underground.
yeah,
And there's something really magical. I actually found that really inspiring because as a kid, you don't question it. You hear two words and then
right.
you see the vision of what it is that's inspired by those words, which was it didn't seem impossible to me that black people could build trains underground. And then you learn what it really is, and that's still really inspirational, but it's more grounded. It's less fantastical
Mm.
by its very nature. And so when I read Colson's book, which all these three things, Moonlight, If Though She Could Talk, and the Underground Railroad, kind of happened all at once because I read the Underground Railroad for the first time while we were in post on Moonlight. So Colson Whitehead was one of the first people to ever watch Moonlight. We sent him a link before it even premiered, and I knew I wanted to adapt the book. It went on to win the Pulitzer, so it was a really big, loud book. And if there was anything that the cachet from winning Best Picture gained us, it was access to this really
Hmm.
amazing work and the actual logistical sort of financing and support to do it.
Well, it seems like a total different project because it is on the one hand kind of naturalistic, but on the other hand, it's magical realism.
Mhm.
I mean, I kind of think in what I likened it, I only can think of like 100 Years of Solitude, Marquez's
Mhm.
book, where there's fantasy elements brought in,
Mhm.
like the Underground Railroad is a real train
Yep. Yeah.
in the series.
And,
So
and the thing,
it's a challenge it's a challenge kind of balancing those elements, isn't it?
it was a challenge, and it became even more of a challenge for reasons that had nothing to do with the intellectual rigor of balancing, realism and fantasy or magical realism. We just had a budget thing that happened that was an absolute catastrophe that we had to work our way out of somehow without that work ending up without that effort ending up on the screen. The biggest thing to me though was I had this childhood feeling of hearing the words Underground Railroad. My grandfather was a longshoreman down at the port of Miami. And so I would see him go to work every day with a hard hat and steel toe boots. And I just imagined someone like him made trains underground. And that was how Black people got free. And and for the time that I had that image in my head, as a young child, it was real. And so right away when I read the book, I thought, oh, I'm going to make this show with this energy of this window of my life where the possibility of men like my grandfather making these railways underground, where it's real. And because of that, this idea of distinguishing between fantasy and reality, it just didn't matter. You know, I just
Mm,
thought of it of
mm, mm.
I put myself in the head of the characters because in the show, even within the show, people are going, "Well, I haven't seen it, so I don't know that it's real." But when they see
Hmm.
it, there it is. There's the proof. This thing I've heard about, it
Yeah.
exists. And so we kind of divorced ourselves from having to navigate, or figure out a different visual grammar, for the magical realism versus the realism. I think the power in it to me was channeling this memory I had of my own personal experience of hearing the words Underground Railroad for the first time. And then just the power of getting into the consciousness of our main character and using the camera, and in particular in that show, camera movement, to relate, what it would be like to just be both within yourself and outside yourself, hoping to break away, and move through this liminal space, in a way that could literally set you free.
It's interesting. Is that everything? If all the films you've been doing up to Underground Railroad, basically your own studying your own childhood,
Mhm.
who you are, where you come from. I mean, I read somewhere that you said if Beale Street could talk is kind of a fantasy of what you would have liked your life to have been.
Mhm. Yeah, it's I grew up, very similar to the main character in Moonlight. And, I'd watch television and you'd see things like, The Cosby Show, or even, the families in the cinema of Spike Lee. And you'd wonder, what would it be like, to live, in a house where there's a mom and a dad and this and that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when you're working from your own personal experience, sometimes you're representing the life that you lived, but then other times you're working from the feeling of the things you lacked, of the things you didn't have access to. And I feel like between Moonlight and A Thrill We Could Talk, that's exactly those two sides of the coin, you know. And Bill Street, it's a very heavy story, what's going on, where Mr. Baldwin is channeling in the 1970s in Harlem. And yet at the core of it is this extremely wonderful nuclear family, full of support and just a real foundation and structure. And yeah, there were times in my life where, I longed for that. I wondered what life would be like, who I would be, with that kind of a structure. I did have it. And so I got to dramatize it, in this film.
Right.
And then with the Underground Railroad, there's something that happened between my mother and I in our actual personal lives that we never got to speak about. And I love that, at the core of the Underground Railroad, Colson Whitehead's novel, there's something between the main character Cora and her mother Mabel that neither of them knows about the other either. And that
Yeah.
and that gap in information is so tragic, but also because I'm a crazy person, profound, and beautiful in a certain way.
Yeah.
It's tragic because of the way it leads them to feel about one another. And yet there's this really wonderful power that comes out of it, particularly in the character Cora, and the strength, the wells of strength that she doesn't know she has access to, that over the course of the journey of our show, she does gain access to.
Mm, mm.
And what was the experience like working in television versus doing a feature?
It was no different. It couldn't be different.
Really?
Only because
Mm.
we got to prep and we were 8 weeks out and realized we were dramatically over budget. And then this is before we shot a single day of footage.
Oh, God.
We had location scouted different regions and had planned to go to those regions and had started building things. And someone else came in and was like, actually, you're twice as much over budget as they projected you to be.
Wow.
And this is like scores and scores of money over budget. And so what we
Wow.
had to do was we were in Savannah, Georgia in the first and 10th episodes of the show, which are set in the same location. And the second episode, we're all going to be filmed in Savannah. And Mark Friedberg, our amazing production designer, who I began working with on A Bill Street Could Talk, he had begun building the train sets. And so those things were fixed. And those were expenditures we had to pay for. And the promise we had to make was that we could make the rest of the show in locations we had not found yet and places we had not scouted, had not built, that we could make those things with the remaining balance of the approved budget, which required us
Oh,
rescouting, doing all these different. So, in that show, the first, second, and 10th episodes are all shot, listed, and planned. everything else is freeform jazz. And because of that, it felt very much like making Moonlight of all things, if I'm being honest. And we just had to just like literally week to week, we weren't sure of what we were going to be doing 2 weeks ahead, 2 weeks ahead. But once we knew, Mark Freeberg was just. I know you guys have production designers on your shows. You have to have.
Actually, we're going to talk
Talk
to him
about-
Okay,
next week.
okay, you have to have him on because he was just he was an absolute artist in figuring out how to make that show happen. But Roger, to your point, because of that, it didn't feel any different. It couldn't. We had to rely on our chops as independent filmmakers to make that show work.
Yeah. Well, looking back, do you think it in the end was a benefit to the way you were working? 'Cause-
Unquestionably. I mean, some of the things that I want to say did, but the truth is got away with, you know, capturing story, but not knowing how it's gonna puzzle together with this other piece of story and this other episode, but capture it because with the means you have in front of you, this is the most interesting thing you can do. This is the thing that's most on theme that you can afford to do with the production structure you have in front of you. You don't know that you can afford to replicate that, you know, 5 episodes later or pay it off. But if we just get this thing, then we can somehow, we've got 5 weeks to build and find a way to connect it with. It was in, I mean, it was scary as hell. It was scary. And please ask Mark about it. It was scary as hell, but it brought out of us, just the best of what we're capable of. I feel.
We always say with limitation comes inspiration.
1000%.
Because if you're given everything, it's kind of dull.
1000. Well, this could have been a little more dull, and I'd have been perfectly fine. Because this was seat of your pants, hair on fire. Are we going to make it? Are we going to get shut down? And yet, the work the crew did, I mean, even down to the Teamsters. I mean, because this was just like the Wild West. And we would have those guys move the trucks, like every other day, every half day. And they never questioned it. They were just always, yeah, we sometimes we get there and be like, well, we thought you might look in that direction. And so we prepare for that. which for what transpo unit is doing that? Out in the woods,
Yeah.
in the middle of nowhere, Georgia. It was incredible.
Well, it is wonderful when you're part of a team like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
When
kind of-
everyone's pulling together.
I'm
Yeah.
probably not a substitute for family, but it goes a long way.
Well, but when you do something like 1917, I mean, that's just like insane.
Yeah.
Especially the nighttime sequence in the town in the last third of the film. That seems impossible. It just seems impossible.
Well, don't you find these things too when you read the script?
Yeah,
But then,
in the beginning, you go, my
you
God, what
work
did
it
we
out, don't
commit
you?
to?
Yeah.
But that
Right.
on the same time too, those takes were long. They were like 7 minutes, 8 minutes long,
Mhm.
and everybody had a part in it,
Mhm.
and we would all be concentrating, and nobody wanted to be the person on minute 7 to screw it all up. So it was really exciting
Yeah.
when it worked.
Very much like your setups in Moonlight, I'm sure.
Oh,
I'm
but
gonna
a
ask
lot
you.
more complicated yours.
Oh, no, I don't. Yeah. But yeah. Mustafa the Lion King.
Mhm.
So why?
It's interesting.
What was the attraction?
The attraction was doing something completely different
Yeah,
from
yeah.
at that
Yeah.
point from the Underground Railroad, really.
Yeah.
Because the way things time out, I took that job a year before the Underground Railroad finished, before it came out. And so there was about a year overlap where even after having accepted the assignment to do MUFASA, I was still working both on post on the Underground Railroad, and because of COVID, we had left about 4 days of filming sort of to be done. We shut down on day 112 of 116 on that production, and I just knew, as we were just talking, and you can see me. I don't know. I think on the podcast, no one can see my face. I get really excited when I talk about how just gonzo and out there the work on the Underground Railroad was. What I
Yeah.
don't talk about as often as, and some of the things I've done, there's some sequences in Moonlight that are quite heavy. The same thing in If Bill Street Could Talk. And yet nothing prepared me for the work that we did on the Underground Railroad. There would be days where I literally would walk off set. I would have to walk off my own set to go and have a moment. I'll never forget the Steadicam
Mhm.
operator,
Mm.
a young guy named Jarrett Morgan, who I'm always going to work with as long as he's available for the rest of my life. Really brilliant operator. We didn't know each other very well at that point, and he came up to me and he said, "Sir, are you all right?" And I didn't realize I wasn't all right, but I turned from him and I just broke down. Like I literally
Ah,
broke
Oh,
down
yeah.
on my
oh.
own set, which I never happened before. I didn't think I was capable of that because I feel like I do such a good job of compartmentalizing,
Mm.
Mhm.
but we had an on-set
Yeah.
therapist on that production. I told her that she had the power, almost like an intimacy coordinator, to pull anyone aside at any moment where she felt like psychologically something was getting to be too much for them. And I had
Uh-huh.
I had one of those moments where she pulled me aside. And so over the balance of that job, I because there were a couple of things that were lined up that I maybe was going to do right after the Underground Railroad that would have been in a very similar register to that. And I knew that mentally, emotionally, that was not going to be the right thing for me as a human being in that moment. So I was
Mm.
looking for something different. I didn't realize it would be that different
That
as
different.
Mufasa. But you have to remember, we got shut down because of COVID. Everyone did. And so I'm sitting at home wrestling with the footage from Underground Railroad because we made it so gonzo. Post was a little bit interesting. You're moving so fast that you're not being as diligent in your note taking. I'm saying, oh,
Mhm.
we captured this piece. And then we figured out, 5 weeks later, how to connect it. Then you get in post, the editors really try to figure out how to connect it.
Yeah.
Um, and and over that time, I was locked in with my now wife. And I realized that I wanted to work in a way that I could actually be emotionally available to my now wife. So it's a combination
Uh-huh.
of all those
Yeah,
different
yeah, yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And I met with John Favreau, and James met with Caleb, who had shot that film, and
Mhm.
and we both decided, myself and James in tandem, that it would be really interesting to explore this mode of
Yeah.
filmmaking, to go from
Yeah.
Yeah.
being out in the wilderness, as wild as you can possibly be, just making shit up, to now theoretically having total control, but trying to engineer spontaneity in a process that every step of the way wants to reject
Mm.
it. And I thought that could be a very fun and different thing to explore for a while. Took way longer than I expected or hoped, because then there was a whole industry-wide strike. I mean, it was just like delay after delay
Mhm.
after delay. But in that time, I got married and I've got a kid on the way. Life happened. And I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
of all the blessings of both learning a whole new toolkit, but really just getting to come back to myself, get some
Yeah.
get some
Yeah. Yeah.
therapy, and work at a slower pace. I think all those things are really beneficial to me, and I'm very proud of the film. I get letters from youth groups all the time about Malele, which is this mythical place that we dramatize in the film, and it's crazy to me to think that the same way young adults encounter Moonlight for the first time, there are now 7-year-olds who encounter Mufasa for the first time, which is wild.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's still storytelling, whatever system you're using, isn't it?
It
I
is, but
mean,
this is a very different system. I mean, it is tricky. It is
what
tricky.
surprised you most?
What surprised me the most was how unelastic it is, or it can be.
Yeah.
And what we,
We've been there. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
and what we did was, for the first year of making the movie, really, we sort of embedded and tried to find a way to get it to become some kind of hybrid motion capture sort of system. And so what we ended up doing, the science, the algorithm of movement is so tricky because we have two legs, the characters have four, bipeds and quadrupeds. So getting the movements to translate in a way then we can have a camera that's transacting in real time. Because James and I, so much of what we do is built off intentional camera movement that's reacting to the movement of the characters. That just doesn't
Mhm.
exist, in this space.
Mm-hmm.
But we got to a point where we realized the animators, they have a really principled understanding of how bipedal movement can somewhat be translated to quadrupedal movement. And so rather than having actors come in and do motion capture, the animators got into suits. And instead of them drawing by hand, the first pass of the animation, they were drawing with their full bodies on stage. And James was there with an actual camera in the virtual space that was responding to them in real time. And that was the really important
Mm.
breakthrough for us was
Ah.
capturing movement in real time. So we would direct the actors in voice first. The editor would cut that entirely, and then we project that sound onto the stage in real time with time code, with sync, and the animators would then be, I like to say, drawing with their bodies, the first pass of the blocking animation, which allowed James
Huh.
to have a camera that was transacting with them in real time as well. And that was when the really big breakthrough happened, where I felt like, oh, now we can tell this story visually in a way where it feels like it's akin to the work that we've done building up to this film.
Mm.
Before
Mm.
that,
Mm.
it was really, really, really difficult.
Mm. Mm. Where do you think those sort of techniques are going to go, and with you involved?
But it depends. If I did another one of these films, I could do it a lot faster because we
Yeah.
we we
Yeah.
we got a system set up that spoke our language. It was really like moving to a country. You speak English, the country is French, but you're filming in Mandarin, and all the crew speaks Greek. It was kind of like that, and we sort of got it
That's
to.
fun, really.
It does sound fun. We got it to a place. I mean, the after work socials would be really fun in that case. We got it
Yes.
to a place where the language became this hybrid that we could all speak. And so I think I could do one of those more fluidly rather than trying to break through the tech or break through the language. We could just express ourselves. But otherwise, I think what we do is so built on this presence, like this present moment stimulus, that I don't know that taking these tools, which is it's really a previs kind of workup, the system. And I know someone like Greg Frazier, who's been on the podcast before, I'm
Yeah.
sure. I know for the stuff he does with Denis, and you work with Denis as well. The stuff he does with Denis, some of these things on Dune, they're massive lighting rigs, in a very difficult space. You can really work that stuff up, in the volume, really well, and get down some rudimentary like camera setups and blocking. But I don't know, depending on what I do next, the budget's not going to
Mm.
support that kind of a workout playground. So it's nice to have sort of in our toolkit. On Bill Street, we shot on Alexa 65, and I really loved working on that large format sensor for such an intimate film. And yet, when we went to do the Underground Railroad, we didn't bring that sensor with us. It didn't fit that story. So I think you're always collecting little things. To me, the biggest thing is the
Mm.
experience with the crew, because there actually was a crew, and it was really interesting to see a crew work in such minute detail, moment to
Mm.
moment, movement to movement, on a film like that, because I'm used to it's just pandemonium, you know, and the only time you really understand the thing that someone has done at the periphery, is once that thing starts rolling and you realize it's all working in concert.
I gotta say, it's really interesting that you're acting as producer on some wonderful films as well. You produced After
Hmm.
Sun,
Which was such a great film.
The
Yeah.
Fire Inside that Rachel Morrison directed,
Hmm.
and recently released Sorry Baby.
Hmm.
Is this? I mean, is this part of your community that, or you're part of this community that you're trying to encourage to?
Yeah,
We need it
I,
at this time, I think.
I think so. I think we had such and when I say we, myself, and Adele Romanski, and we have another partner, Mark Ceryak, who also, of course, went to college with us. But it really comes down to Adele. We had such a difficult time getting Moonlight made. at a very, very
Mm.
modest budget. You might even call it a micro budget. And it's interesting in this industry, there's this saying, a friend of mine has this saying, everybody wants to make a killing, no one wants to make a living. You know, and I
Yeah.
think movies made at these
Yeah.
budgets, they're not designed to make a killing, and yet they can in some ways become the life force, the lifeblood, of this industry because this is where new voices sort of gain access to express, what they're capable of. I'm thinking of someone like Greta
Mm.
Gerwig, who made the biggest movie in the world, I believe, last year. Greta's first film was this movie called Nights and Weekends, that she co-directed with Joe Swanberg. It might have had a budget of $30,000, and it premiered at South by
Mm.
Southwest. And so for us, seeing the difficulty that we had in getting people to believe in us for making a film like Moonlight, we're like, well, now that we have a certain standing, footing, stature, access, whatever you want to call it, there's no reason why we shouldn't, do that same thing for other filmmakers. And these movies are still really difficult to get made, to get the financing for. Something like After Sun, All Dirt Roads, Taste of Salt, Sorry Baby. And yet we believe that they should be made. And so, Adela really is the tip of that spear. And
Mm.
for me, I just love these filmmakers getting to look at me and see this example of, well, I know someone has probably told you you can't possibly make that film for that budget in that way, but you absolutely can. And if you trust us, we will help show you how. And it's been probably the most rewarding, aspect of our careers over the last 5, 6 years has been able to introduce or help introduce people like Charlotte Wells to the world. Hopefully we'll continue to make movies with those filmmakers, but even more, hopefully other filmmakers, who feel like there's no avenue for them to gain access to do what we do, the world of the Team Deakins podcast, that Pastel, our company, can be, if not a direct conduit, for those films to get made, just an example that the effort to make them is not in vain.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
are optimistic? You sound like an optimistic person.
Coming from where I came from, to sitting on a podcast talking to James and Roger Deakins, I have to be. I have to be optimistic. I really do. I just, we watched Marathon Man the other night, just on a whim. We just put it on.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Ah, such a
yeah,
good film. It's
yeah.
just a ride. It's just such a great ride. And then we put on Chinatown for whatever reason. We're watching movies in that era, and
Yeah, yeah,
and those movies still hold a potency. I think if we don't continue to make very potent films about our time, it's going to have a direct effect, on
Mm.
the viability of the art form that we love so much. So I
mm,
have to be an
Mm.
optimist. I do. I have to be an optimist, but also too, I just continue to love movies. So long as I love movies, I'll remain optimistic. When I feel like
yeah,
movies aren't worthwhile, yeah, that's going to be a very dark day.
yeah. Well, you keep making movies, you kind of keep us optimistic by the
Yeah,
films you've been involved in.
right.
So,
Thank you,
you
man.
know, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hey,
Thank you for doing
can I ask
this.
the question while I have you? I've
Of
never met
course.
you in
Yeah.
person. Either one of you can answer this. 'Cause I think you guys both worked on Sicario. There's a really simple
Mm,
shot early in Sicario. It's during the raid on the suburban home where they find all the bodies
yeah.
inside the.
Mm.
The dust motes on the
Yes, how
sun.
did you know?
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
I'm
Well,
gonna.
Danny's really good at those sort of things. In Prisoners, it was tracking into
Into
a
the
tree,
tree.
Hmm.
Yeah,
and
right.
in Sicario, it was the dust motes. But we'd actually storyboarded that shot. It wasn't something he just thought of on the day. That was something we talked about.
Okay.
But yeah, but
Yeah.
Danny's really great like that.
Yeah.
Mm,
I mean, our way of working, the films I've done with him were very kind of structured.
mhm.
We very, like Blade Runner, everything was really laid out in advance.
Well, laid out, but
But then
when
you
you
could
get
still
to
change.
set,
Yeah,
because you know how you never know
Exactly.
what's going to happen until you get on set,
yeah,
and you really have to be open to that
yeah,
magic.
yeah.
So I
But
think more your storyboards are prepping
Yeah.
thinking what's
Think
important
of,
in this
like you
scene.
say, what is the bottom line? What do I have to make this scene work? And then
Exactly.
you sort of embellish. But I like working each which way, really. I actually like just putting the camera on my shoulder and shooting the whole thing handheld, but not
Mhm.
many people like that anymore.
Mm.
And maybe I'm getting a bit too old for it. But anyway, we shouldn't go into that.
Well, I think you guys have to have an episode where you are the subjects, where you come
Ah,
onto your own
I don't
podcast.
know.
I think that's what the
This has been so great. This has been so great because when we were in COVID, this was our kind of world, you know.
Mm.
And it's just so great to talk to people we've never met. I don't know why
Yeah.
we've never met. Well, we haven't. So it's been absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
and we shall meet
Yeah.
someday. Yes.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.